Hi everyone, my name's Kaz and welcome back to another video on rereading some of my favourite books and seeing, do they stand the test of time? Have my thoughts and opinions changed? Or are they really an all-time favourite book? Today, we're going to be discussing Twilight. I first read Twilight 10 years ago and it instantly became a favourite. I reread it really shortly afterwards. I'm pretty sure this is one of the first novels that I reread, like excluding the picture books that I read multiple times when I was really young. This is the first book I remember rereading. So I loved it. I really loved it. I was all in on the fandom. Like I wrote fan fiction. I set up a fan forum for Twihards to like come together and chat about the books and the things we loved about it. Like I was obsessed. This is the first time I got like super heavily into a fandom and was just pretty much all consumed by it. Over the past 10 years, my obsessiveness has definitely fizzled out with this series and I just felt very neutral about it for the longest time. But recently I've been really curious to reread it and see what I think. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm first going to start out with my general thoughts rereading the book, and I also did vlog the entire experience. So I go into a bunch of different details and like live react to the things I'm reading. My expectations going into Twilight once again was that I would recognize it wasn't the best book. I would recognize a lot of the problems with it, but I would still be kind of trash for it. I still thought I was going to I thought it was going to be a guilty pleasure read. It was bad and I knew it, but I still secretly loved it. I'm really sad that's not how it went. I really had to push myself to read this. Like I stopped several times and was thinking of DNFing it, in all honesty. But I wanted to push through and see if things got better. It didn't. It really didn't. Would not recommend. Honestly, it just wasn't worth it. My expectations weren't high going in, but I was still very disappointed. Initially, I was like, okay, the writing's not too bad, but as things progressed, there were little things, different word choices and things about the grammar that started to irritate me, just piece by piece, but then that just grew, and every time I saw something I started getting more and more irritated. I had major problems with Edward as a romantic interest because I think he's an awful human. He's not a human, he's a vampire. I thought he was just a dickhead. He was a dickhead. There wasn't much character development across the board, and in terms of the story, not much happened. For the longest time. It wasn't until the last 100 pages that the conflict is introduced. Future editing Kaz coming in to clarify what I mean here. I just thought I'd better explain what I'm trying to say. So when I say no conflict, I mean no external conflict. There's not really much exciting happening in terms of the story, not much action. I do love my slow character building books, but not in this instance. The first 300 or so pages of the book is a lot of internal conflict with Bella obsessing over Edward, and the fact is I didn't care for it because A, I really did not like Edward, especially as a romantic interest. I did not see the appeal whatsoever. What was young me thinking? But I also didn't care too much about staying inside Bella's head the entire time. As a character, she's not the most exciting, and I just felt pretty neutral about her, to be quite honest. So I wasn't drawn in by her internal conflict in any way. So I was waiting for the action, and it took so long to get there. The book is over 400 pages, and it's only in the last 100 or so that we actually are introduced to the conflict of the story. And that was way too long for me to wait. And then I was like, cool, things are getting exciting. There's some tension. Things are at stake now. Awesome. The climax of the story, the main character, we're in first person, the main character doesn't witness the resolution. She's passed out. So we get to the climax of the story and it just happens behind the scenes. Like, that's not good storytelling. I'm sorry, no. I'm getting very angry about this, and I can rant for a long time, but I think that's all that I'm going to say for now because I'll just end up repeating myself over and over, and then that's not going to be fun for anyone because I'm just going to get more and more angry. Like, I'm getting tense now. This made me very angry. I'm done with this portion of the video. I'm going to leave you guys to my vlog. Enjoy that. See me slowly die inside. Is that too harsh? Maybe? I don't know. I'm just bitter. Let's move on to the vlog. Day 1. My reread of Twilight. Don't know if I'm ready for this, man, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Here goes nothing. I got through a whole 1 page before getting distracted, but to be fair, like, my pasta was ready, so pasta takes priority, man. Anyway, I've got my mac and cheese. I'm like set, ready to read and rumble, so let's continue this bad boy. Wait, is Bella's only carry-on item a parka? But what are you gonna do on the plane if you got nothing? It's a 4-hour flight, and you don't have a book to read. Bella, you're doing it wrong. Why is she moving to Forks again? I can't remember. I'm confused. It's been so long since I read this, oh my gosh. Why can't I remember why she moved to Forks? She's like so bloody unhappy about it. It was her decision. It's gonna bother me. I'm gonna have to look it up before I actually find out why. Ten pages in, and this is like the most negative outlook on life I've like ever seen. To be fair, I relate to it a bit. When I was 13 years old reading this, I would have like related to it because it was like, hormones, things changing, awkwardness, blah, teenage years, blah. But now, 10 years later, I still relate to it, but it's more so because I'm probably getting a little cynical and more anxious. Handkerchief-sized family room. Oh my gosh. It's quite descriptive at the moment. Like, Bella's really honing in on a lot of the details of her surroundings and stuff like that. But aside from that, like, the writing to me isn't like glaringly bad or anything. It's more, I don't notice it too much. I don't really think about the writing much. I think I spoke a little bit too soon about the writing. It's not like the worst writing ever, but it's just like things that I can't help but notice about the grammar and then particular word choice. There's just some words that just don't feel quite right. Probably doesn't help that I'm going into this like with really low expectations, and I think I'm being really critical of it, but still. Am I the only one who finds it weird that the majority of the time she refers to him as Edward Cullen, not just Edward or Ed, Eddie, Ward? It just seems so formal to me, referring to him either in her thought processes or when she's talking to someone else, being like Edward Cullen. Like, I mean, when she's talking to someone else, maybe it makes sense if it's like a really big school and there's a lot of Edwards running around, but I'm pretty sure this is a small town. I think most people are going to know who you're talking about when you say Edward. I'm not very far through at the moment, but I'm a little bit bored, and I think, okay, there's two main things. So one is that it just goes into so much detail about Bella's day-to-day life, and just kind of listing all the things that she sees and all the things that she does, like from her classes, everything between classes and then after class. It's not being super in-depth and listing things minute by minute or anything ridiculous like that, but it's enough detail that I'm like, okay, I really don't care about half the things here. They don't really feel very necessary. And also the fact that like the main exciting thing that's happening is Bella's like obsessing over Edward, like she's got him on her mind like constantly. Okay, so I can't really criticize Bella's obsession over Edward too much because that would be really hypocritical of me. Like, I had a few crushes in early high school, but like Alex, my current boyfriend, was my first serious crush, and I was a little bit obsessive. Some of the things I did probably wasn't super healthy, so I feel like I can't criticize Bella on that fact because I've probably done some similar stuff. Maybe it's because I read Twilight like 3 months before I saw Alex for the first time. I mean, maybe there's a link here. Please just ignore the ridiculous makeup right now. I forgot to film this before I started putting on the jewels. I'm going to a festival themed party tonight, hence the bedazzled face. I'm probably like a third of the way through this right now, and I tried to read some last night, and by 8:30 I was passed out. Like, this book put me straight to sleep, and that kind of, I think it's probably linking in with the first point I wanted to talk about. I went into this reread not expecting to be blown away by how good the book was. Like, I know objectively it's not the best book out there. There are definitely problems with this, but I thought that my reading experience with this was going to be like, oh, it's not that great, but it's still like a guilty pleasure read almost. And things aren't quite going according to plan so far. Edward's a fucking dickhead. Like, he's an asshole. Such a dick. So she's like sitting in the woods by herself, contemplating everything, and she's like, okay, I've got 2 questions to ask myself. Like, what is he? Is he a vampire? And the second question is, what am I going to do about it if he is a vampire? And like the night before, she had a dream where Jacob turned into a wolf and then like lunged and tried to attack Edward, and she woke up and she was like fearing for Edward's safety. And she says, and I knew in that I had my answer. I didn't know if there ever was a choice, really. I was already in too deep. Now that I knew, if I knew, I could do nothing about my frightening secret. Because when I thought of him, of his voice, his hypnotic eyes, the magnetic force of his personality... What? I wanted nothing more than to be with him right now. What the fuck, bitch? No, Bella, you're just getting wet for Edward because he has a hot face and you like the sound of his velvety voice. His personality is not appealing. He's been a rude dick most of the time and a condescending asshole the rest of the times. Like, this is like separate from the first instance where he got a whiff of her. Just the fact that he like openly ignored her, and then when they talked, like, I don't know, she'd make a fool of herself or she'd do something a little bit clumsy or whatever, and he'd just laugh at her all the time. And I'm just like, that's not appealing, that's not sexy. I don't want to be laughed at for small insignificant things that I do that you find fucking hilarious because, I don't know. Future Kaz coming in to clarify once more. As I said, I feel like Edward's laughing at Bella a lot of the time. It's one thing to laugh with her if she does something that's a little bit clumsy, a little bit silly, and they both kind of recognize that what she did was funny, and they laugh about it in a light way. But to me, when I was reading it, it came across as Edward laughing at Bella in a really kind of condescending and judgmental way, and Bella wasn't laughing with him. She was actually made uncomfortable by it, and she was embarrassed by it. To be in that situation where she's a little bit humiliated about something silly or something clumsy that she did, and then having someone laugh at her for it, or quite visibly restraining themselves from laughing, it's a really uncomfortable position to be in. Like, I get humiliated so easily. So seeing these instances in particular really did not paint Edward in an appealing light to me. I would hate to be laughed at like he laughs at Bella. It just makes him seem so up himself. I don't know, that's just how I read it, and it grinded my gears. And like, yes, he saved her life, but they've literally had like 2 conversations of any substance whatsoever. Like, Bella doesn't know him. You're not in too deep, honey. You know like nothing about each other. It's just, ugh. And then, hold on, there was a passage a little while back as well. What did she say? Of course he wasn't interested in me, I thought angrily, my eyes stinging, a delayed reaction to the onions. I wasn't interesting, and he was. Interesting and brilliant and mysterious and perfect and beautiful. Okay, he may be perfect, he may be fucking mysterious, but he's not interesting. Like, he hasn't done anything. All you've seen of him is like him sitting in class chuckling at you, or him sitting in the cafeteria with his family, all of them just blankly looking off into the distance and not at each other and not at anything else. Like, how the fuck is that interesting? Oh my god. Brilliant, again, why? There's no evidence to show that he's brilliant and interesting. Perfect, maybe like aesthetically, but he seems like an asshole. Also, I picked up on the fact that when she opened her window one morning and she's like, oh, this is the first time in years it hasn't squeaked open, because obviously Edward got involved and like WD-40'd the thing so it wouldn't squeak when he opened the door, snuck into her room and watched her while she slept. Sexy. Also, when he offers to give her a ride to Seattle, first of all, like, him offering that I don't find very realistic. That whole scenario just doesn't seem appealing to either of them. I don't know why it was a good idea in the first place. But also the fact that she's like, honestly, I can't keep up with you. I thought you didn't want to be my friend. And he's like, I said it would be better if we weren't friends, not that I didn't want to be. She's like, oh, thanks, now that's all cleared up. I love her sarcasm, by the way, because his behavior is just fucking ridiculous. He says, it would be more prudent for you not to be my friend, but I'm tired of trying to stay away from you, Bella. And then he's like, so will you go to Seattle with me? You really should stay away from me. I'm just like, this scenario irritates me because he's kind of turning it around so it's on Bella, being like, you really should stay away from me. It's like, no, you're like forcing yourself into her life. You're like putting her in these awkward situations and doing so many things that she asks you not to do, like picking her up and taking her to the nurse's office when she says, no, put me down. It's like he's just being really forceful and inserting himself into her life when she's enamored by him but also made uncomfortable by him as well. It's like, you don't get to turn around and say, you really should stay away from me when you're forcing yourself into her space. No. No, 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 no. At that stage, she hadn't like put the dots together that he was a vampire, so she's not in a position to make an informed decision. You can't put the onus on her. One thing I am enjoying is seeing how dated this is. Like, I read this in 2008. It was written in 2005, or like published, sorry, in 2005. And there's like, she's communicating with her mum via email, like text messaging isn't the hip thing, and everyone's using CD players rather than just speakers. Also dial-up internet. Oh my god, I remember those days. They were horrible. I'm just finding it so interesting how fast, or seemingly fast, these things are dated. Like, it's been 10 years since I read this. It doesn't feel like 10 years since I've read this, but like, wow, things change, man, things change. Conclusion, at this point, I am bored. Nothing's happening. She's just obsessing over Edward, and I don't understand why, because he's being a dickhead to her. He's not a sexy man. Like, yes, he may be physically attractive, but nothing about his personality is appealing whatsoever. But there's still 2/3 of the way to go, so maybe I'll be a little more accepting of the romance when they actually get to know each other and Edward stops being a shitty butt plug. I'm about 60% and I've got a few notes that I've been making as I read. Also, one thing that I think I forgot to mention, not a fan of the albino and multiple personality disorder jokes that happened earlier on. Not a fan of that. Oh, I actually completely forgot that the whole scene of being like, how old are you? 17. How long have you been 17? I forgot that that scene didn't happen like out in the woods. That's just in the movie. But it happened after Bella went to Port Angeles and there was like these 4 dudes that were kind of following her, and Edward swoops in and saves the day, yada yada yada. And then on the drive back, that's when that scene happens. I completely forgot that. Also, just going through and reading this and me being like overly critical of so many different things, and probably maybe being too harsh in some areas, I don't know. I just would have found it so interesting if I had annotated my copy of Twilight 10 years ago when I was reading this and loved it, because I like read it twice in the span of like a week because I was on holiday and didn't have anything else to read. So it would have been so interesting if at that age I was in the habit of annotating books and writing notes and things like that, and just going back and being like, oh, my young self loved this, and now I'm like, the fuck? Just so many things that I think when I was younger I thought was really charming about Edward, but now I'm like, oh my god, like serious creeper alert. There's also one sentence that I just I can't. I really can't. It just makes me laugh. Hesitantly, comma, always afraid, comma, even now, comma, that he would disappear like a mirage, comma, too beautiful to be real, dot dot dot. Hesitantly, comma, I reached out one finger and stroked the back of his shimmering hand, comma, where it lay within my reach. That is just one of the worst sentences I've come across. What did I just read? So like this far through, I'm wondering what the complication is. I'm just finding so many red flags. The fact that Edward like openly admits that he'd followed Bella and figured out where her house keys were. Stalker behavior. When Edward admits that he like creeps into her room almost every night and watches her sleep, and she's like, I should be annoyed, but I'm flattered. I'm like, no, don't be flattered by the fact that he's stalking you. No. And he's like, what else is there to do at night? Read a book, play a game, talk to your family. I'm like, low-key regretting doing this experiment a little bit, just because this is making me very mad. It's been a little while since I picked up Twilight. I needed to prioritize some other books for my book club and read-alongs, and honestly I really just needed a bit of a break, because it's every time I read it, it really riles me up and makes me quite mad. Since I updated you last, I've only read about 15 pages and I have a lot to talk about. It's getting to the point where I'm really starting to question whether it's worth me continuing and finishing the book. I think one of the main reasons why I am sticking to it is because I'm curious. The fact that I'm on page 288 and there's no plot yet makes me wonder if when the climax arrives, when I get to that point in the story, maybe I'll find myself enjoying it a little bit more because the action will have increased, there will be some stakes, and things will actually be happening. Because at this stage it's just about Bella and Edward, who meet, they come into each other's lives and weirdly obsess over each other, and that's all we've got at the moment. Since my last update, I've now started the chapter called The Cullens, where Bella goes to Edward's house and meets his family, like officially. Backtracking a little bit, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in my last update, so I will just touch upon this briefly. A couple of my notes from the previous chapter where Edward stays over at Bella's house and like reveals that he's been watching her sleep for the past who knows how many nights. So on page 275, Bella says, "I love you." They've still only hung out like 3 times. And then like 2 pages later, Edward says something like, "Are you gonna tell Charlie that I'm your boyfriend?" And she's like, "Oh, is that what we are?" So like they're not even technically dating. Not much has really happened. And she jumps in with the L word. Am I missing something? Is there like 200 pages that I completely missed here? Like, what's going on? Also, the scene right after Bella and Edward have met Edward's parents. When Edward is saying, like, Esme is so happy that he's found Bella. And she's saying, all this time she's been worried about me, afraid that there was something missing from my essential makeup, that I was too young when Carlisle changed me. She's ecstatic. Every time I touch you, she just about chokes with satisfaction. What, for the past 100 years, she's just been constantly worrying about Edward because he hasn't found a girlfriend? Is he not allowed to be single and happy? Why is this worrying her so much and taking so much of her mental capacity? Like, calm down, he doesn't need to find someone. And I also kind of wish that we got to spend a little more time with Edward's family before getting an insight into what they think of Bella, because they kind of exchange pleasantries, say hi, hello, and then the topic of the piano is brought up and Edward starts playing for Bella and the family kind of leaves them for some privacy. And then Edward goes on, having read their minds, and tells Bella what they all think of her, how they really like her, blah blah. And instead of all of that, I kind of had wished that scene had been extended so we got to witness Bella interacting with Esme, Carlisle, Jasper and Alice a little bit more, and actually having it shown to us what they think of her rather than Edward telling us, because I really don't care what Edward says. I've had enough of his shit. And I've also just gotten to the point where Bella's like, what happened with the exchange between Carlisle and you? Because I think Carlisle thought something and Edward responded, like that little mental conversation going on. And she's like, what's going on? And Edward said he wanted to tell me some news, but he didn't know if it was something I should share with you. And this is when there's one of the other non-human eating vampire groups is coming into town. Bella's like, are you going to tell me the news? And he says, I have to, because I'm going to be a little overbearingly protective over the next few days or weeks. And I wouldn't want you to think I'm naturally a tyrant. He's been weirdly overprotective this entire time. Saying that's not going to change the fact that he's a tyrant. Not gonna lie. Also, when Edward just like goes and grabs one of Bella's tears and then what? He wants to be a salty bitch? Is that what this is? So those are my current thoughts. I don't know, am I just being really nitpicky here and just getting really angry at so many of the small things? But I also think it's just being fueled by the fact that I'm really, really struggling with the characters and the fact that there's no plot. Like, come on. There needs to be some stakes here, apart from the fact that, you know, Edward could crush Bella without a thought, but she just doesn't care. So is it really a stake to her? Like, she doesn't give a damn. Future Kaz interjecting once more. Before I get into the main point of this, I just wanted to quickly mention that I have actually deleted a lot of my comments. There's a lot that I criticize, and a lot of it is really small details that probably don't make too much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. They all add up. But for the purpose of this video, so you're not bored the entire time, I have removed a lot of my comments because they are really just me nitpicking. But there's actually a couple of things that I originally mentioned a couple of times, but I actually just want to use this opportunity now to go into a little bit more detail because I don't really think I got my point across. And that is how Edward is quite possessive. So obviously he makes that comment, jokingly says, I don't want you to think I'm a tyrant, but the fact is he is unhealthily overprotective and dominating. There's a couple of instances. There's a time where he holds Bella in an unbreakable grip and a time where he like throws her over his shoulder, and these things are really glossed over, so I don't actually know what Edward's intent with them are. They might be in jest, or they might be meant as a kind of like, come closer to me, this is a romantic move. But there's not quite enough description about Edward's kind of body language and behavior. And then also I think not enough of Bella's reaction to kind of gauge how this is all playing out. When Edward throws Bella over his shoulder like an object, like a sack of grain. Bella protests, but it doesn't indicate if Bella's like, oh no, stop, or if she's like, put me down now, I don't like this. It's not descriptive enough. In the instances where I want it to be more descriptive, we don't get quite enough to illustrate how these scenes play out. My take on it in these instances is that it's Edward being a bit dominating and kind of moving Bella where he wants her. Now, I know these instances are small, but there's another time a little bit later on in the book when Bella is being hunted, and I think Edward like puts her in a car or something and is like trying to get her to safety. And Bella says, "Where are we going?" No one answered. No one even looked at me. "Damn it, Edward, where are you taking me?" "We have to get you away from here, far away, now." He didn't look back, his eyes on the road. The speedometer read 105 miles an hour. "Turn around, you have to take me home," I shouted. I struggled with the stupid harness, tearing at the straps. "Emmett," Edward said grimly, and Emmett secured my hands in his steely grasp. "No, Edward, no, you can't do this." "I have to, Bella. Now please be quiet." I think this on a bigger scale kind of illustrates how Edward just kind of moves Bella as he sees fit, and first of all, doesn't communicate with Bella what is really going on. The fact that she's like, "Where are you taking me? What is happening?" And him and the rest of the family just don't respond at first. And then eventually he's like, "We're getting you to safety." And she's like, "No, turn around. You have to take me home," because she's worried about her dad. And then he gets Emmett to hold her again in like an unbreakable grip. And I know it's not Edward, but it's on his command that Emmett is holding Bella still. So with this scene and other instances where Edward is being dominating, it's just, it really makes me sad, and it really irritates me how Edward treats Bella. The fact that he doesn't communicate with her what's going on and just moving her about as he sees fit. Like, if she's in danger, communicate that with her and explain why she needs to be moved to safety and why you're doing the things you're doing, but also listen to her as well. Bella is just given absolutely no say in any of this. And obviously in Edward's mind, he's like, I know what's going on. I have the strength and the capability to keep her safe in this instance, but that doesn't mean you can give her no choices whatsoever. How is that a healthy relationship where it's all really one-sided? He makes all the moves and she just has to go along with it. That doesn't mean that what he's doing is romantic either. He's being possessive and dominating and overbearing. You can be protective, but I think that you can't sacrifice someone's agency and someone's willpower and someone's ability to make their own goddamn decisions. And hell, if she makes a stupid decision, explain why that is a stupid decision. But just communicate, explain, give and take, man. Also, another random thought. Did any of you get into writing fanfiction for Twilight? Because I did. I think I only posted like 5 chapters of the story to fanfiction.net, I think it was. But that's like how obsessed I was with Twilight. One of the first books I reread, and the first and only book that I've written fanfiction for. I got obsessed, and so it's a little bit devastating, a little bit depressing that I'm having such a hard time reading this 10 years later. On that note as well, even though I am talking quite negatively about this book, I have a lot of things that I'm really struggling with and not having the best time reading it. Like, that in no way diminishes the fact that this was, it still is, such an important book in my reading life and beyond that as well. Like, this played such a huge role in how I read and the books I read and how I interact with other people who read and things like that. And just like so many other people around my age, like, this was such a pivotal moment in my reading life. So I'm just finding this such an interesting kind of project and seeing how my reading taste has changed so much. I still really do cherish it, but the content alone, outside of all of this context, is not holding up so great. I'm actually about to head off to the movies shortly. It starts in 40 minutes, so I'll have to leave soon. Alex is coming to pick me up, but while I'm waiting for him to get here, I thought I'd just squeeze in a few more pages of Twilight. Okay, I'm currently at the part where Edward is talking about Carlisle's history. So much storytelling. Oh, I'm sad. Okay, so like Edward basically just gave a rundown of Carlisle's history, and then the two of them go to Carlisle's room so Bella can learn more about his history, I suppose. And Edward was like, would you like to tell the story? And I was like, oh cool, we can actually hear from Carlisle himself about Carlisle. Because I don't know, I want to see more of the characters on the page. Even if it's still kind of info dumping and telling their life story, I want to kind of hear it from them rather than Edward just saying everything. I just love another character to come in and just take some of his space away because I don't want to hear about him anymore. Anyway, so yeah, Edward's like, would you like to tell the story? And he's like, oh, actually, I've got to go off to the hospital, blah, blah, blah. You know the story anyway. It was like, no. He's just like, I keep waiting for it to happen. For what to happen? I know that at some point, something I tell you or something you see is going to be too much, and then you'll run away from me, screaming as you go. I won't stop you. I want this to happen because I want you to be safe, and yet I want to be with you. Two desires are impossible to reconcile. I'm not running anywhere. You should run, bitch! He's dangerous. Run. Alex is here. Movie time. Goodbye, Twilight. I won't miss you. It's been a couple of weeks since I read some more of Twilight, but today is the Dewey's 24-hour readathon, and I decided that I wanted to finish Twilight today. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. I have my ASMR rooms going. I'm in Howl's Moving Castle. Yeah. It's happening. Bella's a shitty friend. It's hard to find a lot of the things that Edward does to be, like, romantic and sweet. First of all, because he's an asshole. But also just because, like, a lot of things, like, his hand lingered by my neck, and I'm just like, he's thinking about fucking eating you. And I'm just like, that's not romantic. Ah! Oh no! I'm getting cramps. Fuck, I don't have to deal with my period today. No. Wait, what about when Bella had her period? Did Edward just have to, like, get the fuck out? Otherwise he would have devoured her from a very sexual place. You know what I wish I'd been doing? I wish I'd been annotating this while I was reading. I seriously fucked up, man. I fucked up. This would be, like, really amusing to read in another 10 years and see if I agreed with all the criticisms I had, or if I was like, okay, Kaz, you were just being really bitter and harsh. What happened to you? Why is it so awful for Bella to ask if he's going to put his seatbelt on? Like, yeah, you're a vampire. Yeah, you can drive fast relatively safely, whatever. But, like, still, other people can be assholes on the road. He's like, I'm never angry with you. How could I be? Brave, trusting, warm as you are. What does that mean? I hope it doesn't mean because she's like human, alive, warm-blooded. He just said, I love you. But why? They've, like, hung out 4 times. What the fuck? Page 328. We're just about to meet the other vampires. So this far through the story, we're finally, hopefully, getting to a point of conflict. I really wish that by this stage we'd had more development of Alice, because as far as I can remember, she's probably my favourite character from the series and I really like her. I just feel like we haven't met her many times, like we haven't had too many interactions with her, so she is quite flat. She's not fleshed out very much. But I did want to say I really appreciated the fact that when they're on the run, Edward and Esme and stuff just kind of pick Bella up and then run so that they can move faster. Alice actually asks if she's allowed to pick up Bella, and Bella's like, you're the first one to ask permission, and I actually really appreciated that, so that made me happy. But then another thing with Edward, on the phone with Bella when she's hiding out in Phoenix, they start speaking on the phone and Bella's like, oh Edward, I was so worried, and he's just like, Bella, he sighed in frustration, I told you not to worry about anything but yourself. She's emotional, you know this. Don't, like, sigh in frustration when she's relieved to hear your voice. Like, that's so rude. And he just acts as if all of her emotions are childish. Really close to finishing the book, thank God. We literally have the villain, like, explaining how he did everything and how he pulled it all off and why he did what he did. Oh, it's so typical. I'm a little irritated in terms of the climax that Bella didn't do much. I mean, she ran headfirst into the climax of the story. She ran into the conflict. She had enough agency to do that. But in terms of actually the resolution, she's like thrown about and knocked out and doesn't even witness like Edward coming along and killing James. She's passed out for all of that, and then she wakes up and he's there, and then she's getting treated and saved. Like, we don't even see the main conflict and its resolution. We don't witness it. She's passed out. In terms of what Bella does, running towards James to save her mother, I mean, at the very least, she just sped up the process so that she wasn't on the run forever, which is good. But like, what an anticlimactic ending. Like, we don't even see it. So Bella's just talking to Edward and asked why he didn't just let the venom course through her and turn her into a vampire. And she's like, it just seems logical. A man and a woman have to be somewhat equal. As in, one of them can't always be swooping in and saving the other one. They have to save each other equally. I'm like, Bella, that's the most rational thing you've said this entire book. It's done. I'm so happy I finished this book. Like, that was a journey. So I finished reading the book way back in October, and then I was so excited about the fact that I'd finished it that I forgot to film an outro for this video. I just want to say a huge thank you for sticking with me throughout this video. Like, if you've made it this far, I would love to know, so please leave a comment down below saying I want to suck your blood. But I just really appreciate you sticking so long through this really, really long video about me mostly ranting and cursing and just nitpicking Twilight. I mentioned this earlier, but I do once again want to emphasize the fact that this was such an important book in my life and in my reading life, and none of this experience has diminished that fact. It's just shown me how vast I've changed as a person and as a reader, and it was interesting to see that in action. I will not be continuing the rest of the series. I've read those once. I think I'm good with that. If you've read and loved Twilight, I just want you to know as well that I don't judge you for it. I don't think any less of anyone who does love the series. Hell, I was a huge, huge fanatic way back in the day. I know that I'm very harsh in this video, so I just want to address the fact that I'm not judging anyone for loving this book. That would just be ridiculously hypocritical of me. So I just want you guys to know, absolutely no judgment on my part. But again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it in one way or another. I would very much be curious to hear your thoughts on the book, especially if you've done a similar thing to me and read it quite a long time after the fact. I'd love to know if it held up in your eyes, or if you had any similar thoughts as me, any similar experiences. I'd love to hear those down in the comment section below. But I will see you guys very soon in a new video, and until then, I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye!